When Congressman Morelle pressed Attorney General Bondi on whether January 6th pardons cover unrelated crimes, what happened next exposed something deeply troubling about how justice works when politics takes the wheel. Her evasions weren't just bad optics. They revealed a deliberate strategy to avoid accountability that should alarm every American who believes the law applies equally to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Meng for holding this important hearing, and thank you, Attorney General Bondi, for appearing before us today. Madam Attorney General, I serve, in addition to the Appropriations Committee, as a ranking member of the Committee on House Administration. I sent you a letter last week, along with my Republican counterpart, Chairman Brian Stile, requesting an increase in federal prosecutory resources to address threats against members of Congress, particularly in light of what happened last week in Minnesota, that tragedy. In 2024, the U.S. Capitol Police identified and received nearly 9,500 concerning statements or threats against members. Federal prosecutors have only secured 8 convictions so far, and the heightened threat environment demands an all-hands-on-deck approach. Will you commit to assigning an assistant U.S. attorney or a special assistant U.S. attorney in each of the 94 federal districts to, at least on a part-time basis, investigate and prosecute threats against members of Congress?
So thank you for bringing that up, and I take that very seriously. Not only what happened in Minnesota was horrible. I've spoken to Keith Ellison. I've spoken to Amy Klobuchar about that. It's horrible. We are involved in that. The FBI was involved. Our U.S. attorneys are involved. Many of these are district to district. So the way we're doing that is, I will tell you, my National Security Division is involved in all of those and assisting in those. We meet every single morning and we discuss that. But many of those, Minnesota, will be handled in the state in which it happened. Another one is
So, may
Governor, I'm sorry if I can keep going. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I don't mean
Quickly,
to.
though.
I filibuster. Governor Shapiro and what happened in Pennsylvania with Governor Shapiro. I've spoken to Governor Shapiro. We are working hand in hand, our U.S. attorney with the district attorney there, hand in hand, just like in Minnesota. I made sure our U.S. attorney and our district attorneys there were working hand in hand. Political party doesn't matter when something like this happens. And I also want to make sure all members of Congress are safe as well.
Okay, and I would reiterate, Chairman Stile and I think Chairman Stile and I agree that at least a part-time in each of the 94 districts would be appropriate. Let me change topics for just a moment. I'm
Really
sorry.
quick on that. Yes, we're doing that through our National Security Division, so I think that's already in the works, and I would be glad to meet with you in a secure facility to talk about that.
Very good, thank you. Continuing, in addition to my role here, the committee that I serve on as an authorizer oversees Capitol security as well as federal elections, so I'm closely following the aftermath of January 6th. Recently, several defendants who received presidential pardons related to that day are now arguing in court that the pardon covers crimes like, for instance, illegal firearm possession discovered in a search of an individual's home in California months after January 6th. What's your position on whether the pardons cover these separate offenses?
The pardon power rests with the president, not the Department of Justice, and some of that is pending litigation, and I cannot discuss pending litigation.
Well, I'm not asking you about who has the right to a pardon. I think as the Department of Justice in February wrote, the pardon is an act of grace which removes the punishment from a crime a person has committed. It further said, in its effect, the granting of a pardon is in no sense the overturning of a judgment of conviction. It is an executive action that mitigates or sets aside punishment. So as the chief law enforcement officer, what's your opinion, not the president's power of whether he can offer a pardon? That's pretty clear in the Constitution. But for crimes committed unrelated to January 6th, would you suggest that the pardons would cover activities or crimes potentially committed outside of that by the same person?
Well, I don't know if you're referring to Joe Biden pardoning his son after he said he would not pardon Hunter Biden, or the
No, I actually
commutation
referred
of
to
all
January
the
6th. I'm sorry.
all the sentences that the people that were on death row. I've met with those families.
No,
and all of those sentences were commuted. I'm not going to comment on pardons on either side of the aisle.
So, well, I'm not asking about either side. I'm asking, you're the chief law enforcement officer in the United States. You have a responsibility directly, but you swore an oath to the Constitution, not the president. Want to know what your views are on the extent to which pardons cover potential crimes committed by individuals who have been pardoned but unrelated to January 6th.
Do you mean the ones that were done by the auto pen? I'm not going to discuss
right.
anything that
Mr.
could be
Chairman,
or not be
I
pending litigation.
respectfully, Ms. DeLauro accused you of filibustering. I think that's the height of filibustering. This is a serious, serious topic. And for you to suggest that you don't have an opinion or to divert to other things that have nothing to do with January 6 pardons, I think is frankly demeaning to your responsibilities and your job. With that, I'll yield back.
What Congressman Morelle did in that exchange was more than just asking questions. He exposed the dangerous gap between legal technicalities and moral accountability that threatens equal justice. When he pressed Bondi on whether January 6 pardons cover unrelated crimes, her response revealed a calculated strategy to avoid giving straight answers about one of the most consequential legal questions facing our democracy. The core issue cuts to how pardons work in practice. When someone receives a presidential pardon for January 6 activities, does that immunity extend to completely separate crimes discovered later? Federal agents search someone's home months after January 6 and find illegal firearms. The question isn't whether the president can issue pardons. That's constitutionally clear. The question is whether those pardons become blanket immunity for any crime that person might have committed. Bondi's evasion strategy was textbook deflection. First, she redirected to the president's pardon power, which wasn't what Morelle asked. Then she pivoted to Hunter Biden's pardon, again completely irrelevant to the legal question at hand. When pressed specifically about her role as chief law enforcement officer, she claimed she couldn't comment on pending litigation. But here's what makes that response so problematic. Morelle wasn't asking her to prejudice specific cases. He was asking for her legal interpretation of pardon scope, something any attorney general should be able to discuss in general terms. The Department of Justice's own February guidance states that pardons remove punishment but don't overturn convictions. This creates a legal gray area that prosecutors must navigate daily. If someone with a January 6 pardon commits tax fraud or weapons violations, do prosecutors pursue those cases or assume they're covered? Bondi's refusal to provide guidance leaves career prosecutors in an impossible position. What's most disturbing is the pattern this reveals. When law enforcement leadership won't clarify pardon scope, it creates what lawyers call a chilling effect. Prosecutors start second-guessing themselves. Agents hesitate to investigate. The machinery of justice slows down not because of legal barriers, but because of political uncertainty. Morelle's frustration was justified because Bondi's non-answers have real-world consequences. Federal prosecutors across 94 districts need clear guidance on how to handle cases involving pardoned individuals. Without it, enforcement becomes inconsistent. Some districts might aggressively pursue unrelated crimes while others defer entirely. That's not equal justice under law, that's justice by geography and political calculation. The exchange also highlighted a deeper constitutional tension. Bondi repeatedly mentioned her discussions with various officials about security threats, showing she can engage substantively when she chooses to. But when asked about pardon scope, a question that affects how her department enforces federal law, she claimed her hands were tied. That selective engagement suggests the issue isn't legal constraints, but political convenience. Morelle's final rebuke captured something crucial about institutional responsibility. He reminded Bondi that her oath is to the Constitution, not the president. That distinction matters because it defines whether the Department of Justice functions as an independent law enforcement agency or as a political instrument. When attorneys general refuse to provide legal clarity on politically sensitive issues, they blur that distinction in ways that damage institutional credibility. The practical implications extend beyond January 6 cases. If pardons become broadly interpreted shields against unrelated prosecution, they transform from acts of mercy into tools of impunity. Future defendants will push similar arguments, testing how far clemency power can stretch. Without clear guidance from leadership, courts will decide case by case, creating inconsistent precedents that benefit whoever has the best lawyers. What should concern every American is how this pattern normalizes evasion as acceptable governance. When the nation's top law enforcement official won't clarify basic legal principles, it signals that political considerations outweigh professional responsibilities. That's not how functioning democracies operate. It's how institutions hollow out from the inside, maintaining their formal structure while abandoning their essential purpose. Morelle's questioning wasn't partisan theater. It was institutional accountability in action. Democracy depends on officials who will answer direct questions about how they interpret and enforce the law, especially when those interpretations affect equal treatment under law.